Right, hello world. I'm here to talk about kind of the best camera for somebody that wants to upgrade from their phone or from a tiny compact camera even. Maybe they've got like an old 7 or 8 megapixel camera compact thing. I think they can get better results from it because they're into photography. Okay, that kind of presupposes a few things. It means you want your photographs to be better. Okay, now the thing about that is that you are the photographer and you are in charge of getting your photographs to be better. Okay, you have to remember that when you go through a lot of this blurb here. Now I'm on Canon's website just purely because I find the Canon range to be totally baffling. Okay, there isn't a perfect camera here. Okay, there are some pretty good ones, there are some extremely good ones, and there are some darn good ones. Okay, you know, that will sort of blow the cobwebs off of anything. Okay, but I find their website patronising. I find that a lot of YouTubers that are purely discussing tech, let's get rid of that, that are purely discussing tech, you know, if you were to say, oh, what's the best DSLR for a beginner, they will all point you down to Nikons or Canons or not Olympus because they're mirrorless, aren't they? But well, it doesn't matter. We know which is the best camera for a beginner. They'll all be sending you down to the bottom camera in the range. Okay, it's not necessarily your best choice. Okay, and I am about to show you Hawaii. Okay, so first of all, which range suits you, beginner or pro? Find products for every level. Now here we have the compact digital cameras. Okay, a lightweight fixed lens camera. Great image quality in the palm of your hand. Now Canon are not going to do themselves down with the quality of their images. By and large, the quality of their photographs are fantastic. They're light years ahead of what you would get on a mobile phone. Okay, and this camera here, sorry, this photograph here was shot with a PowerShot G3X. Okay, it even gives you the metadata here, f6.3. 1/100th of a second at ISO 400. Okay, now that's all very well and good. Okay, if we move up to the DSLR cameras, this was taken with the EOS 5DS. Okay, that's from their professional range of cameras. It's 50 megapixels. Okay, so what you're getting from this is the equivalent of a mere thumbnail. Okay, pretend it's a thumbnail on your iPhone in comparison with what this camera is capable of doing. Okay, and again here with the mirrorless cameras. Now the mirrorless cameras they have APS-C size sensors in them. So in theory, they should be as good as at least some of the bottom range, if not some of the intermediate range of the DSLRs. Okay, but yeah, I mean, you know, all of these are showing that it's a photographer taking the photographs. Okay, and if you just point the camera and shoot it, you're not going to get anything remotely resembling these photographs. Okay, and also they're pretty much interchangeable. Okay, the 5DS could take a photograph that is as good quality as that. Okay, the PowerShot G3 could take that photograph, and they could all take this photograph. Okay, and get the effects as well. Okay, for instance here we've got the water nicely smoothed over. It's just done by putting the thing on a long exposure, and any camera can do that. Okay, it's the photographer's eye in the first place that makes that photograph. Okay, it's the leading lines going in, Then you find the boat that's exactly on the rule of thirds, okay, and you've got a foreground, you've got a middle ground, you've got a background, you haven't got too much sky, and it's just beautiful composition. That's what's made that photograph, okay, and any of these cameras can do it, okay, and at least to photographs of that size, if not in fact actually most definitely a rather large amount bigger, okay, even with, you know, a 12 megapixel camera or something like that, okay. But anyway, let's move on, okay. We're going to have a look at the DSLR cameras here, okay, and we're going to see which camera suits you. I find this very patronizing. DSLR for beginners, DSLR for enthusiasts, DSLR for professionals, okay? So you could demean yourself by calling yourself a beginner, okay? But these DSLRs for enthusiasts are also good enough for many professionals to use as well, okay? It depends on what you're taking photographs of and what their eventual use is going to be. If it's for websites, then anything will do, okay? If it's for, you know, huge exhibit prints, then perhaps you want something with a higher resolution and with a larger sensor, okay? So I'm going to try and first of all, just tell you how baffling this range is, and then try and sort it out a little bit. Okay, all right. Now I will come clean here and say that I own two Canon DSLRs. Okay. I have a 750D and I have a 7D Mark II. Okay, I have numerous lenses. Okay, and the amount of money. I have to say. At great financial struggle to myself, but I have to say that really, again, it's the lenses that you put on these things that, yeah, I mean, you see, this doesn't tell you whether that was with the kit lens or with a more expensive lens. Okay, the 80D there, f5.6 again, but kit lens or a more advanced lens, okay? And here, f16, you see, I mean, there's nothing there to show any wider angle than 5.6. Well, any lens will do f5.6, okay? So, yeah, I mean, I just find it all a bit anyway. Okay, so let's have a look at the range for beginners, okay, just in case. Now, the more digits there are in a model number, as in 1300 has 4 digits and 760 has 3, the more digits there are, the lower down the range it is, okay. And within any family of digits, like a 3-digit number, for instance, okay, the lower the number, the lower down the range it is, okay. It's different for the professional range, okay, but not for the intermediate, okay. So let's have a look at the details of this. Okay, first of all, they're not really showing you too much, okay. I'm having to look in the magazine to find out that the 1300D and the 100D, for example, have 9 focus points each, okay? 9 focus points back in 2000, back in the early noughties at any rate, was a lot of focus points, okay? But not nowadays, okay? It's not going to be all that quick at focusing, and especially if you're me and you don't like huge amounts of buttons and menus and menu options and things like that, I would rather the focus just chose itself, okay? I know what I want the camera to focus on. If it's not focusing, then I know what to do if it doesn't focus, but I would much rather, you know, have the speed of the camera choosing the focus point, hopefully getting it where I want it to go. If it doesn't, I can quickly change it, but you're not gonna have that kind of flexibility with these cameras, with the 1300 or the 100D. Okay, they both have 18 megapixels, which isn't bad. Okay, the 1300D uses the Digic 4 Plus processor. Okay, think of Digic as being Canon's version of Intel. Okay, and again, the lower the number, the slower it is. Basically, it's basically the computer processor that does all the jiggery pokery, that turns the light hitting the sensor into an image. Okay, it means that these cameras, you know, if you're trying to take pictures of your kids running round, or your sports day or anything like that, then you're going to find that the focusing is slow, you're going to find the processing is slow, you're not going to be able to get many frames per second. In fact, I'll try and look that one up now. Are we being told that even in my magazine? Yeah, it looks like you're going to get 3 frames per second. Yeah, looks like you're going to get 3 frames per second. Might be alright, but it will be frustrating nonetheless. Okay, so if you put your finger on that shutter button and it's going really, really, really slowly, you're going to find that you're not going to be able to capture as much action. Okay, the focusing system is going to find it hard to track, and in terms of handling the thing, you're going to find yourself in the menus more often than not, especially as the 1300D does not have a touch screen or a tilty flippy screen. Okay, now if we look at the 100D, I think that's even smaller in size than the 1300D. Now let me just sort of pause for a second, okay, and just think about how you are trying to thread a needle. For me, it's the most frustrating thing ever. Okay, if I was given a huge thing the size of a knitting needle with an eye in it that I could actually see, and some, you know, some nice thick string, then I could thread that fairly easily. And it's the same with these cameras. Okay, yes, they all have wonderful image stabilization, either built into the lenses or built into the bodies if you're an Olympus fan like me. But the laws of physics state that something that is so tiny is going to be hard to hold. It's going to be more susceptible to camera shake. Okay, and that would be my main objection with this one. Okay, so again, 18 megapixels. We've got a higher maximum ISO. Okay, these cameras are capable of going to stratospheric ISOs. Even the ISO 6400 of the 1300D is stratospheric. You wouldn't be able to buy, back in the old days of film, you wouldn't be able to just nip into your local pharmacist and pick up a roll of 6400, even if ISO 6400 existed. It would be very, very specialist, and it would be ultra grainy. Okay, the difference I think between the 100D and the 1300D is that on the 100D, because your maximum ISO is higher, that range of that 6400 will be slightly more usable than on the 1300D. Okay, think of the ISO 6400 as being a Daihatsu Charade trying to do 85 miles an hour. Yes, it might be able to manage it, but you're going to burn everything out trying to achieve it, you know. You've got just a little bit more headroom to play with, so that the ISO 6400 would feel more comfortable on the other cameras. And they also have like a kind of simulated higher ISO than 12,800. All these other cameras do. Okay. So yeah, the 100D does have a touch screen, which means less digging down in menus. It's far easier. There's no swivelly bits to toggle round, or buttons to press, or arrows, or whatever. You can go straight in on the touch screen. And I find with my 750D that it is invaluable. Okay, but I'm still much more happy in aperture priority mode on the 750D, and I'll tell you for why when we get beyond this. Okay, and again, you see with the 700D we've got 18 megapixels. Okay, the 700D and the 100D have Digic 5 processors, but the 100D still only has 9 autofocus points. The 700D still only has 9 autofocus points. Okay, it's going to be, it'll be a little bit faster. You'll be able to get slightly higher frame rates. The tracking might be a bit more efficient, but yeah, 9 autofocus points is not really the ticket. Really, it's not tickety-boo. Okay, so I would, if I were someone jumping from an iPhone to a DSLR camera and I'm going to take my photography seriously, I would dismiss those out of hand. Okay, just simply because of the autofocus, the limited amount of control that you have as buttons or just on the touch screen, and without having to dig down into thousands of menus. We'll come on to that later. Don't get me started. Okay. The 750D, we're now moving into 24.2 megapixels, which is far more competitive with manufacturers like Nikon and Sony and Pentax. Okay. Our top ISO is still 12,800. Okay. Both of these cameras, in fact, actually, these cameras are essentially the same camera. Okay, and looking at it from the outside, the only thing that this has that's different is that it has an LCD screen on the top, which some people find very helpful. I find too hard to read. Okay, my eyes are going, and I'm not very good at wearing glasses. But yeah, you're going to find that this one has an LCD screen. Okay, now if you take any of these cameras, and I think I kind of started talking about this earlier and I got sidetracked, but if you take any of these cameras and put a better lens on than the kit lens that comes supplied with them, you're going to get much better results. Okay, you may not be exploiting the full power of the lens, but any better lens that you put on is going to really kind of up your results and up the quality of your results. The compromises that have to be made with the kit lens are pretty much, although they're better quality of course, but they're pretty much, if you go back to blah 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 blah, if you go back to here, these compact cameras here that have got built-in zoom lenses, okay, to keep them down to a price, Okay, they have to compromise the optics, and the main way that they do that is by not letting in as much light to start with. So that means that if you're in the dark or in a lower light situation, shall we say, now even the forest on a sunny day is going to be dark because of all the tree shading and everything like that. So, you know, don't think like low light conditions is you know, taking a photograph of your kids snuggled up in bed, because it's not. It could be an awful lot lighter than that. That is low light, okay? Twilight, anything like that, it's low light, okay? And the aperture on the kit lens, let's just go back to here again. At 18 millimeters is 3.5, f3.5, okay? Professional lenses will give you f2.8, which is wider, or f1.8 or 1.4, which is even wider still. The smaller the f number, the wider the aperture can go, and the more light it can let in, okay? The aperture is the hole in the lens that lets the light in, basically. If you zoom in on the kit lens, you've no longer got that 3.5 to play with, okay? It then shuts the aperture down to f5.6, which is very small, okay? And that's the widest aperture that you can get, okay? It will blur your backgrounds nicely, provided that you're close to your subject, but it's not going to be good for low light photography. It's going to be quite frustrating, okay? That being said, I do actually own an 18 to 200 millimeter Canon lens, and I went out in the afternoon, last Saturday afternoon I think it was, just for a walk around Hastings with my camera, and yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. And you know, it's, yeah, again, it's f3.5 at the wide angle, fully zoomed in, it's f5.6. I found it no trouble whatsoever, and you know, I really enjoyed it, okay? Once it got down to sort of twilighty time, it struggled a bit, but I managed to get some usable photographs out of it, okay? So yeah, I mean, this is your entry level range of cameras here, okay? And if you really were pushed for budget, I don't think the extra features on the 760D are worth the extra money, really, okay? For me, I don't like the LCD at the top because I can't read it, okay? It's too small, okay? I can look through the viewfinder, I can easily see the settings that I have, okay? I can appreciate that if you're on a tripod, then perhaps looking down at it might be easier, but it's not particularly difficult to look on the screen. And especially as both of these cameras, the 750D and the 760D, have tilty flippy screens as well, you can just twizzle the screen out and just have it there at eye level so you can see what settings you've got, okay? If you're on a tripod photographing a beautiful blue lake with a little boat at the end of the jetty, okay? So yeah, for me, the 750D with Canon's 17 to 55, okay, which now the kit lens is 18 millimeters to 55. All of these are APS-C size sensors, which is roughly 2/3 of 35mm film negative, which in digital terms is known as full frame. This is like 2/3 of that size. So that means that 18mm, you have to multiply it by 1.6. Okay, so if you multiply 18 by 3 and divide the result by 5 and add that on to the focal length, you're going to find that it's about 29mm to 80 something millimeters, nearly 90mm. Okay, my 17 to 55 goes just a little bit wider, but because it's more expensive, it has a wider aperture of f2.8, and not only that, if you zoom in, the widest aperture you can use is still f2.8, okay, which means that it's going to be much better in low light situations, a much better all-purpose lens than the kit lens. Okay, so I have one of those. I have an 18 to 200 and I have an 85mm. Okay, for these APS-C size cameras, the lens designation is EFS. Okay, EFS. Okay, the full frame cameras, which are much more expensive because their sensor is the same size as a piece of 35mm film, they are just called EF. Okay, now the thing is that you're actually better off if you have APS-C size sensors in your camera. You're better off getting a lens that is designated as that. It will be optimized to perform at its best like that. Okay, an EFS lens will not work on a full frame camera. An EF lens will work on an APS-C camera, but it won't be giving you its best. Okay, you're better off spending less money, getting a slightly smaller lens, which is less weight to carry, and getting an EFS lens for it. Okay, all right. So that's these cameras sorted. Let's go on. All right, let's get more baffled, shall we? Okay, just before we leave this here, okay, there is a proper hierarchy here. Okay, the 1300D is the most basic camera. It has the slowest processor, the slowest focusing system, has no touchy screen, no tilty swivelly screen. This one has a tilty swivelly screen, or a tilty screen at any rate, but it has no it has no touch screen. It also has a faster processor, as does the 700D. I'm not sure what kind of screen the 700D has. I will find out for you. I will look it up. Okay, very angle. Yeah, it has a. Yeah, the 700D has a tilty, swivelly screen, vari angle screen. Okay, so that's fine. As did the 750D and the 760D, and I believe it's touchscreen. Yes, it's touchscreen. Okay. So there's definitely a jump. Okay. By the time we get to the 750D, we've got Canon's latest 24 megapixel sensor with Digic 6 processor in it, which is Canon's latest technology, and it all makes sense. Okie dokie. All right, let's twiddle on. DSLRs for enthusiasts. Should be grateful that there's not quite so many of these. Okay, all right, we have 3 of them. Okay, now, as I said, the more digits, the lower down the range the camera is. Okay, so you would expect here that the 80D here would be, because it's got 2 digits as opposed to the 60 and the 7D, that it would be a quote unquote worse camera. Okay, right, well, let's have a look, shall we? All right, here we have the 80D 24.2 megapixel sensor. Okay, so that's up with kind of the latest standards, as it were. Okay, 45 point autofocus, 7 frames per second, continuous shooting, which is much faster than the 1300D, and even the 750D and 760D can only manage 5 frames a second, which is not too bad, but 7 frames per second is pretty darn good. Okay, we have this dual pixel CMOS autofocus system, okay, with 45 points, okay, which means that much more of the image is going to be fall under one of those autofocus points. In the 9-point ones, it's all going to be around the center of the screen. Okay, I should have said that the 750 and 760 both have 19 points. Okay, which is pretty good. Okay, I find it works extremely well. Okay, all right, 45 points then is going to cover most of your screen. Okay, and it has a Wi-Fi and NFC, near field communications. I presume that means Bluetooth, perhaps. Okay, basically the Wi-Fi just allows you to get an image off the camera and onto your mobile phone so that you can Instagram it or whatever you want to do with it. Let's have a look. The 60 is a full frame sensor. The EOS 80D is an APS-C size sensor. Okay, it's cheaper than the 60. Okay, oh god, yeah, and hold on. Sorry, going back here. Look, poor, slightly better, middling, even better, and possibly even better. Going from right to left. And here we are now going the other way, except also we've got double digits here. Now we go to the 60, which is a single digit. It's a full frame sensor, which means that it will give you better images, especially in low light, than the 80D, but it's only got an 11 point autofocus system, okay, which is not much better than the basic ones. Okay, we have GPS built in, but I mean, I would rather have a few more, sort of autofocus points. Do you not think that, at least 19 autofocus points would be better than GPS? Okay, and again we have Wi-Fi file transfer and remote control. We don't have Wi-Fi and NFC. What gives? What gives? You'll be paying more for the 60 as opposed to the 80D for the larger sensor, which I do concede is a huge benefit, but the rest of it is just rubbish, really. Okay, the 7D Mark II. This is the one that I have. Okay, this is another APS-C size, so it's smaller than full frame. Okay, but it's not that much smaller than full frame. It can take all of my existing EFS lenses because it is the same size sensor. Okay, 20.2 megapixels though. Okay, compared to the 750D, the 760D, which both have 24. This 6D here only has 20 megapixels. Lordy, lordy. Okay, we do have 10 frames per second continuous shooting. They've been a bit devious here with these numbers, I believe. 45, 11, 10. So if you're not reading it carefully enough, then it could seem like better, not so good, and even worse. But actually look at this, you see, 65 point autofocus system with intelligent tracking autofocus. Okay, that's that basically means it tracks your subjects better. Okay, we've got full HD for movies, okay, with 60 frames, 60p, 60 frames per second. I don't understand the frames per second system when you're recording video, okay. All of these are essentially HD in terms of video, okay. There's no 4K video here at all, okay, because like this 7D Mark II I think was released in about 2013, 2014, okay. No one was on 4K video then, okay. And again, we have this dual pixel CMOS AF, okay, dual pixel autofocusing. All of these autofocus points here are cross type, okay. That basically means that they're in the form of like an addition sign, and they are far better and far more precise at focusing in on a small point, such as the eye of a parrot, for example. Okay, so yeah, this is a hodgepodge here. This is a hodgepodge. I don't like it. Okay, I just think it's weird. Okay, and I think that anybody who is seriously considering their photography, they're going to go to an EOS 80D. Okay, hasn't got as many focus points, but it is extremely capable. Look, you see, we actually have the twiddly bit round the back, which is much easier to use than that little D joystick there, and it's some way between the kind of it's a bridge. It's the middle ground between the professionals and the supposedly lower end cameras. Well, that 750D is really capable. Okay, it doesn't have the swivelly button at the back, which makes it less easy for manual mode, but it's an easy camera to control. You don't really have to think about it, and just touching on the screen for the just for the basic menu options is fantastic. The 7D Mark II has no tilty swivelly screen. The 7D Mark II has no touch sensitivity. Okay, the menus are horrendous. Okay, but what the 7D Mark II has to mark it out above anything that is below that is that loads of the things that you want to do are just buttons on the camera. So if you want to increase the ISO, you press the ISO button and twiddle the main dial and it works. Okay, it also has a swivelly button at the back as well, which is great for going into manual mode. Okay, just because basically you use the back dial for aperture and the main dial on the front, which is near the shutter release button, to change your shutter speed, and it's easy peasy. Okay, this 65 point autofocus on here is brilliant. It is just, it has to be said, it is just brilliant. Okay, again, you'll have loads of people saying, I don't want to use the automatic focus. Why would I use the automatic focus? I want to be in control. I want to be in control. But more often than not, you'll find that this 65 point pattern, if it's left to choose, will find exactly what you want to focus on. And it will do it far quicker than I can. Okay. Yes, there might be times where I want to focus on something very specific that I can't get it to focus on automatically. So yes, I can use this little button here. I believe this is called the nipple. And that will just toggle the autofocus mode so that I can choose any one of these little squares, like for instance here where we have the red active autofocus point, which is on the eye of this motorcyclist here. Okay, so yeah, that's the range in terms of, you know, what these cameras can do is confusing. Okay, I love the 7D Mark II. I love the autofocus system. I don't like the lack of Wi-Fi. I don't like the lack of tilty screen, or more importantly to me, really, the lack of touch screen. Let us poddle further forwards. Okay, DSLR for professionals. The 5D Mark IV. This is their brand new kind of, I suppose, this is the professional workhorse. Okay, it's a rugged, and I have to say, by the way, I'm not sure about the 6D, I'm not sure about the 80D, but I do know that the 7D Mark II is weatherproof. Okay, they don't actually sort of put that nicely on their little list there, but it's far more rugged than the 750D. Okay, I'm not sure about these two, how weatherproof they actually are. Yeah, so let's go to the DSLR for professionals then. So we've got the 5D Mark IV. Okay, which is their latest 5D. Okay, there still looks like they're selling the 5D Mark III here, but that's old news now. Okay, 22 megapixels, 6 frames per second, HD video. I believe it only has a 19-point autofocus system, which if you're paying in the thousands of pounds for a camera, you want more than that. Okay. But the 5D Mark IV, let's have a wee looky. Oh, Amy Goodman sent me an email. Oh, how fabulous. Oh, shop now. Can't afford it. Okay. Here we can do 4K. Okay. 30.4 megapixel sensor. Because the devil is in the detail. Let's just see if we can get a nice spec list for this. Why is this now? Oh gosh. Oh, meaningful specifications. Who would have thought it? Okay, so 61 points. Only 21 of them across type. The 7D Mark II has 65 points, and all of them across type. This is a full frame camera. Okay. Dual pixel RAW. Image micro adjustment, bokeh shift, ghosting reduction. I think that's similar to something that Pentax do, which is the kind of when you take a picture, and I think Olympus do it as well. When you take a picture, you can have it in this mode where it'll take like 4 pictures when you press the button once. And essentially it's to compensate, you know, even further for things like camera shake and stuff like that, basically. And you know, you're not quite on the focus point, whatever, and it will sharpen it, and it will kind of merge them together to kind of give you the best image. It's not HDR, which is one lower exposure, one correct exposure, and one higher exposure, and blend all those three together. This is something different. I think, again, it's sounds like a little bit like image stabilization to me, but I'm not sure. Okay. Let's not worry about that. 7 frames per second. Maximum frame rate there. 4K movies. It has touch screen. Okay. It has GPS and Wi-Fi. Compatible with the Canon Camera Connect app, which is dire, but it does the job. None of it is as good as Nikon Snapbridge, apparently. Okay, the 5DS 50.6 megapixels. The 5DSR, which is again 50.6 megapixels. It has no anti-aliasing filter. And do you notice now that when you're in single digits, the 7D Mark II here, this is the lowest down of the professional cameras. This is why, another reason why all of these things are kind of blurred boundaries, really. The 6D is supposedly a bit better than the 7D, but in many ways it isn't. The only way that it's really any better is the fact that it has a full frame sensor. Okay, but every other point there, GPS records your location. Yeah, the 7D Mark II's got GPS as well. So even that, okay, we don't have Wi-Fi on this one. That one has Wi-Fi. Yeah, so basically the closer you get to one, the better the camera. Okay, so what they're calling their professional range starts at the lowest down, because the Mark III is obsolete now, with the 5D Mark IV, 5DS, which has dual Digic 6 processors, the same as the 7D Mark II, but is 50.6 megapixels. This one again is 50.6 megapixels, but with no anti-aliasing filter. If you're bothered, an anti-aliasing filter, what it does is it basically, when you take photographs of things like patterned material and stuff like that, then you can sometimes get the illusion of other patterns. It's called moire, basically, which is basically a kind of distortion of intricate patterns, basically. Most of us never ever notice it. But by taking it away, Canon can charge you more money than for the 5DS and give you slightly sharper images. It's interesting to note that Nikon now don't have anti-aliasing filters even on their base spec D3400. Okay, so yeah, and then we have the EOS 1DX Mark II. Surely this is due to fall off the cliff. 20 megapixels. It has a 61-point AF system, which is fabulous, and 14 frames per second, which is absolutely insane. Its ISO will go to 409,600, but it's a full frame camera with basically 20 megapixels. What gives? What gives? And I suppose really for me, when we're talking about, you know, cameras and oh, you're confused, there are so many options and stuff like that, Canon have done that for themselves. If you go to Olympus and you look at their top mirrorless cameras, you'll find that there's basically a 10, a 5 and a 1. Okay, and again it goes 2 digits, and then the lower down the number the better it is. Okay, we're on Mark IIs of all of those, so OMD 10 Mark II, OMD 5 Mark II and OMD 1 Mark II, which has only just come out and which is extremely expensive, which is probably one reason why I've moved to the Canons. And you know, to be honest, I love them, these Canons, but they're just, you know, there's just a case of stick a pin in and think, you know, what can I afford? You know, if I buy this lower down body, can I get a better lens for it? Okay, but I would say you ignore those first two, the 1300D and the 100D, and you go for either a 750D, ignore the 760D, because basically it's more money for not a lot extra. Okay, and that LCD screen, I just don't get on with it. or, you know, better still, go for the 80D or the 7D Mark II. I tell you something, I found myself straight out of the box going into manual mode with the 7D Mark II and knowing exactly where everything was on it, and, you know, can almost do it without looking. Whereas I'd be thinking, oh gosh, what little button do I press on the back of the 750 to get into manual mode? Okay. And I have a feeling that using the 7D Mark II is actually really going to improve my photography. And, you know, not to mention the fact that you haven't got any of the little cozy modes, okay? They've all got an automatic mode, okay? Which, again, if you're a basic beginner photographer that's come off of the iPhone and you want to take control of the pictures that you're taking, the three things you want to control are the aperture, the shutter, and the ISO. Those are the only three things you need to worry about. Okay? Perhaps you may have to tweak the focus from time to time, but most of the time leave it on automatic focus. It will work. Okay? These are darn good cameras. Okay? And I'd say really it was a choice out of those three, depending on, you know, the lenses that you choose to go with it. Don't just stay with the kit lens. Take the kit lens off and, you know, I don't know, just have it as a you know, as a backup or something like that. But, you know, use better lenses, you know, prime lenses or the fixed aperture zooms. Okay, I'm going to finish now because I've just talked myself out of everything here. But Canon, you need to sort yourself out, because if anybody else can sort out their range so that we understand what the numbers mean and that it starts at the bottom and goes up to the top, and we're not patronised by being called beginners or being called intermediates, but, you know, that find some other way of doing it, which basically means that we understand the range that we're buying. That's really the message. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. It's December the 30th, so I'm going to wish you all a happy new year, and have a nice time tomorrow night as well, whatever you're doing. Okay, I will see you in the new year, and I might play a record. You never know.